Let's start from the beginning. Before the Guncannon 2, there was just the Guncannon. And the Guncannon mass production type, if you want to count that one too. Anyways, the Guncannon is one of the original 3 musketeers, alongside the Gundam and Guntank. It is a classic in its own right. If the Gundam is the lead guitar player and singer, and the Guntank the drummer, then the Guncannon is the bass player of the band. When Gundam Battle Operation 2 first launched, there was of course the original Guncannon, a decent support, capable of doing its part in 350 and 400 cost matches. It had a fairly good beam rifle for its cost range, and for the time back in the early ecosystem. Grenades, headvokins, and its reliable ballistic shoulder cannons to finish off its secondary arsenal. Much like how the Guntank received its own mass production type, the Guncannon also received its own mass production type. The only real issue it ever had was that its twin 100mm machine gun had a slow firing rate. That was eventually fixed, and as of now, the Guncannon mass production type is a fun 300 cost support. Anyways, eventually came along the Guncannon 2, not to be confused with the GM Cannon 2. Although, if we're going off of visuals, and maybe this is just me, but visually, the Guncannon 2 appears to look more like the actual GM Cannon 2, since it only has one beam cannon, while the real GM Cannon 2 appears to look like it should have been the official Guncannon 2, since it has the 2 shoulder cannons. But for whatever reason, someone at Bandai or Sunrise decided to switch their names. We may never know why. Regardless of my OCD and nitpicks, when the Guncannon 2 first arrived into the game, it had one major issue. At first glance, it appeared to be just like the original, but with the beam cannon instead of a ballistic one. If only that was so. The reality was that its beam cannon can only be fired when focused. There was no other way, and you cannot move when focusing it. This kept a lot of players from ever wanting to use the Guncannon 2. And as a result, the Guncannon 2 was basically dead upon arrival. Since it was a 400 cost mobile suit, you can simply use the original Guncannon's level 2 version instead. The two share basically the same weapons, the only difference being that the original has the reliable ballistic cannons instead. So really, it wasn't even a question of what players were going to pick between the two. It was always going to be the original. Or the level 3 Guncannon mass production type was also an option, especially after it received a buff to fix the firing rate of its machine guns. Or if players really wanted to, they can use the level 6 GM cannon. Not exactly the same weapons, but still reliable in trying to cover the basics of a support. And these of course are just the tip of the iceberg for the competition that exists at 400 for a support. The Guncannon 2 developed such a bad reputation that when it was eventually fixed, no one really noticed, no one even bothered to look at the update, or no one even cared. It was too little too late. I myself cannot tell you when this update happened. In any case, now you no longer have to focus the beam cannon in order to fire it. The only price to pay for not focusing it is that an unfocused shot will not stagger an opponent. But the added benefit when not focused is that it will have a little aim assist. At this point, you can do a fairly impressive 4-hit combo when alternating back and forth between the beam rifle and the beam cannon. The beam rifle has a 3-second cooldown rate and for when switching to it, and the beam cannon only takes 1 second. Just keep in mind that you will not stun your target until the 4th shot. The problem with this, however, is exactly like how I just said it. It will not stagger someone until the 4th shot. That's not including any raids with stun resistance. On one hand, you might think that well, if the enemy is not being staggered and doesn't see me, then I can maximize the damage to the legs because they're less likely to try to evade my shots. In theory, this makes sense. In practice, however, the problem is that the aim assist is likely going to automatically aim at the center of your target instead of the legs. In the process of dealing with this limitation, I've come up with a new combo for it. Instead of starting your attack with the beam rifle or cannon, instead start off with the grenade throw, and then switch to the rifle and cannon to build a stun. However, the issue here is that it's unlikely that your target is going to hold still for you to pull this combo off. Another combo, in theory, if you can land all your shots, is if you first use a grenade and then switch to the headvokins. Believe it or not, the headvokins actually have a better stun build than either the rifle or cannon. Just keep in mind that this is in theory if you can land all your shots with the Vulcans. And fair warning, this does not apply to raids and some generals charging at you, so results may vary when out in the field. K9 Productions is not responsible nor liable to any injuries that may and likely will occur in the game. Talk to your doctor before taking this plan. Be sure to also discuss this with any close loved ones in the case of frustrating and disappointing in-game performances. This of course leads me to bring up its obvious flaw. The stun build of the beam cannon is far too low. I am not asking for it to be able to stun without focus. That's all fine as is. My main issue is that it shouldn't have to take 4 shots to build up to a stun. And that's all assuming I can land all 4 shots consistently on a moving target. With its quick firing rate, when switching back and forth, 2 hits might result in breaking the suit, and therefore 3 hits would be ideal. So that would in theory be a combo that starts off with the beam rifle, then the beam cannon, and then back to the beam rifle. Otherwise, despite having some limited success with it, even in 500 cost matches, I can't think of a way to convince someone to pick it over the other Guncannons, even the general version. From a practical standpoint, it doesn't really offer anything that the others don't. There's no other skill that it has to separate it from the rest. Sure, it does have a quick boost skill for jumping up, but with the slow movement speed, there are going to be few instances where you'll be able to benefit from such a skill. Unless it had a dodge roll or double tackle, there's no real reason why someone would pick it in their right minds. And when comparing it to the others of its kind, even if it has more skills than its 300 and 350 cost brothers, with its overall performance, it doesn't really matter. So what if it's a 400 with more skills than the original? When out in the field, it's not exactly going to perform all that better. The results will be the same at best. At worst, well, it's a support, so I'll let you guess on how that's going to go. Some players like to argue that more skills equal better suits and performance, but that's not always the case, and it's definitely not the case here. The best way I can describe the Guncannon 2 to someone on this channel is if you were to take the Gunner Gundam, place its beam rifle on its shoulder as a secondary weapon, and give it the Guncannon's beam rifle for a primary weapon, and some grenades on the side. But that's all from a practical standpoint. From a fun standpoint, I have to admit that I did get some enjoyment out of using the Guncannon 2. Since very few players tend to pick it, in between 400 and 500, and even fewer have any experience facing it, it was interesting seeing how players reacted to me. In some instances, they didn't even notice that I was causing them damage, because they really only took notice of taking damage if they've been staggered or knocked down. In some matches, some stubborn support mains refused to let me be the only support on the team, even though I read it up before them. And it's always a little funny when I outperform them. Kind of like when someone cuts you off on the road only to end up at the same stop sign or red light after you were simply cruising at the legal speed limit. Also, if you're shooting at someone who's hiding underwater, the aim assist of the beam cannon will let you know where they are, which will make shooting at them from above a lot easier. So in conclusion, maybe the Guncannon 2 is not exactly the worst mobile suit. It can be good under certain conditions. Maybe it deserves a second chance. I think enough time has passed since it first came out for us to forgive it and give it a second chance to redeem itself. Would I recommend it to anyone looking to get an edge over the competition? Of course not. But I would recommend it to someone who is bored and looking to mess around with something that is not commonly seen. The Guncannon 2 may not look like much at first glance, but holds potential to a select few players. As always, this has been Mobile Suit K9, signing off.